something I've been thinking about lately, if I can bounce this idea off you guys, is that,
Yeah.
um, it can be easy. Like I just kind of went to this place of like accusing or attacking individuals and saying, these guys are like fucked up, like fuck them. They're racist. They're bigoted. They're, wanting to commit harm on others for, to me, what seemed like, ridiculous, stupid, biased reasons. But then again, you have to look at what led, some of the not all of the blame rests with them. It rests with the culture that they
Mhm.
are, from. Um, People don't just, you know, I don't know. People don't just spout out of the womb and they're just suddenly like, white supremacists. Like that's a process. That's a systematic economic political process of building someone's worldview in such a way that they hate certain groups and will commit or want to commit like harm on them. So I think like an important part of it is like we got to look at the culture that we're in and that we're raising children in and that we're educating people in. Like goes back to the Bosnia discussion. Like if kids aren't being raised with if kids are being raised in their own compartmentalized religious worldviews and it's just reinforcing the divisions, then there's very little hope for creating new perspectives and like new paths forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you guys think?
What do you
Does it rest on the individual? Does it rest on the collective? What's going on here?
I think, well, Fedora, what do you think? I want to hear your
No, no,
opinion.
no. No, man. Please.
All right, all
Your
right.
word.
Yeah, no, I think it's not an individual problem. It's a community problem. And I mean, in the United States, historically, our communities have been segregated, and it wasn't luck; it was by design. We have, and that's why people are constantly talking about this systemic racism because from like as early, since the country was founded, basically, the elite people or like the political elite and the wealthy people have been creating a country that would basically sustain their wealth and power. And they did that. They use a lot of different strategies in order to do that. And we've seen, if a lot of people have read, I can't name any specific books because I'm not that kind of person, but there are lots of books out there that will explain about how they decided from an early time that they're going to split people by race. And at some points in history, it wasn't even just about black people. There were Italians, there were Irish people, there were Chinese people, Mexican people, who were all discriminated against as being non-white,
Right.
and therefore uh, they were justified as being justified. They justified discriminating against those groups. And then when it served them, they decided to let those groups into the dominant culture and then had them discriminate against other groups. So it's just been like a discrimination passing of the torch, in
Right.
America. So
Right.
when you have that kind of environment for years and then people who are now segregated into a community where no one's really going to oppose that view, then you basically cultivate these bigots or racist people
Mm.
who would never find a way out of that. They, even if they might think it's wrong, they might have questions, no one around them would give them the way to get out of that because
Mm-hmm.
they're benefiting from that system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a community thing, and that's why I think it's kind of blowing up now because it's so hard to be segregated in an internet era. It's so hard to be isolated in your thought, although
Mhm.
some people are isolated in like their Facebook groups and things like that. But that's a choice. That's a choice at this point, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why a lot of people are angry, and a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
say that people aren't taking advantage of the power of the internet because you can always look for something else, even if you're and at least that's what I do, right? I can't say that everyone has that ability because some people don't even have the access to the internet. But if you do have that access, it's kind of like your responsibility to be like, all right, well, I think this, but what about the other people? What about the other side? What are they thinking? And that's what'll lead you to make a more balanced perspective on the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Interesting.
pick up one thing that you mentioned, Tarik. That you mentioned, like, I mean, I feel like we're kind of talking. I feel like the way the historical process of categorizing people and letting some in, it's like, okay, now the Irish are with us, great. Okay, now the Jews, great. Oh, black people, no. We these choices were made at various points in history. Um, Essentially, who is white and who's not white, and it's whiteness that holds power. You know. But that whiteness is just a concept. Um, you know, Obviously, it's not like a real thing because within whiteness, there's many, 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 many groups. There's Jews and Irish and Spanish people and Italians and you know. But once you kind of make it into the label of whiteness, then that comes with certain like protections and privilege. And I forgot where I was kind of going with this, but I guess what I wanted to say is that is through that process, like essentially my point is everyone who is white in America has that toxic bias from whiteness. So it's like sometimes it manifests itself very violently. There were some hate crimes actually this past week in the town I'm in. Some white supremacists broke into an Indian restaurant that's been a part of the community for 30 years, and they caused $100,000 worth of damage. And they spray painted all over the walls like really racist, bigoted things, and wrote "white power" and wrote "Trump 2020 bitch" and all these things.
Yeah.
And so that's a very like in your face overt racism. But I think that there's also, it's also there's implicit racial bias that I have too. Even I'm like, like somewhat educated and like from like a progressive community and blah blah blah, all that. But like, despite that, that doesn't in any way exclude me from the system of racism. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that just goes for all like white progressives who are like, I love diversity. You know what I mean? Like, we still benefit and privilege from structural racism, whether we like it or not. So, anyway, sorry to rant, but I guess that's just where I'm at in my processing with all this, is how to like show up in my white body with this privilege I have, and to how to best grapple with it in a productive way and be there for communities of color, but also like respect their process and like not in any way like be white saviory or something like that. But I don't know, Tarik, what are your thoughts on like whiteness right now, like the sort of the white response to Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, well, it's pretty complex. It's very nuanced, right?
Yeah.
Because my personal view is, on one hand, I know, yes, white people have a lot of privileges and have a lot of inherent benefits of just being white. But on the other hand, I also know that it doesn't necessarily mean that their life is easier in every aspect, right? Because we a lot of us face some of the same challenges, and those challenges are not always based on race. Sometimes they're just based on socioeconomic status. And that's like where I see the real problem is, when we have the wealthy people of the country continuing to get wealthier and the poorer people having a harder time, then what ends up happening is, if you're poor and white, you might get an opportunity in a town that's like mostly white, and then the black people see that and they're like, oh, but you got that because you're white. But it doesn't mean that necessarily that you're a racist person for getting that opportunity. It's really the system that's to blame. However, at the same time, people who do get those opportunities, who are white, need to put their voice out there. They need to let people know that, from whatever they can get, they're also with all people, right? And specifically Black people. They're with them in the fight to get to have an opportunity that would help all of us who are in this like lower economic status raise up. But right now, the issue is that Black people are being killed constantly with no kind of justice to help them. So, I mean, the best way I see it is you just need to pay attention. You can't be apathetic anymore. You got to really stand for something, right? Even if you're struggling, if you go to like a Black Lives Matter parade and you're standing shoulder to shoulder with Black people, you're doing yourself a service as well. Because as those issues are raised by the Black community and are being forced by the numbers of the combined community of white and Black people, the issues will no longer be able to be ignored by the wealthy and the powerful elite. That's the whole reason why they want to split us by race, because they know that if we're split in that way, our movement is less powerful. So to me, that's where the real allyship is. It's first, it's just acknowledging, like what you're doing is basically acknowledging your privilege and understanding why you may have some of the opportunities that you have as compared to a lot of other people. But the second thing is using your voice in whatever way that you can, in whatever kind of industry you might be in, or, you know, whether it's donating, or there's a lot of ways to give, but basically also recognizing why the movement's happening, aiding it in whatever way you can, and seeing to it that the main problem, which is the inequality, is eventually addressed. So, and yeah, I mean, my main thing is like, just don't paint yourself as a villain if you're working on it. The only real people that I blame as people who are not doing a service to the movement are people who are willfully ignorant, who don't want to think about it, who don't want to like check out the history, check out what's been truth from what's been lies, and who want to just say like, who want to like diminish things. Like, I mean, the all lives matter thing also gets kind of weird, because both messages are right? All lives do matter. They do. And Black lives matter. And they're not irrespective of each other. I mean, at the same time, yeah, Black lives matter right now because we've been oppressed for so long and our voice wasn't being heard. So it wasn't like all lives were constantly at threat. It was mainly the Black lives. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't care about all lives, right? Because there's a lot of people suffering right now, especially with this pandemic. A lot of people are suffering. So in that way, yes, all lives matter. But basically the idea to help the least fortunate group as soon as possible will eventually lead to all people being helped. So that's why people say, don't say all lives matter right now. This is not the time.
We're not there yet.
Right, exactly.
We're far from there. I don't know if we'll, it's so.
We will. I don't know. I'm an optimistic guy, I guess. I mean, I'm pessimistic about other things, but when it comes to unity and people just coming together, I'm very optimistic. I think a lot of the things that have divided us are very old ideas, and they're being challenged so rapidly now with the internet. It's just so hard to be that kind of person without being exposed to things now, or just a lot of people getting on your case. I mean, I'm not a big fan of cancel culture, but some people do need to be canceled. That's also a truth, right? There's constant yin and yang, but we just need to be responsible and really pay attention to nuance and context when we are mad about something somebody did or said online or in person.
Yeah, it is all about the nuance and the context. It's about looking past the two loud voices and trying to hear the nuance in the debate, and like hear people out and call people out and call people in. And I mean, I'm not saying, I don't want you to get the wrong idea that don't think that there's ever going to be like that. There's no hope. I do think that we are progressing forward in a positive way that's moving towards more equity. But I don't know. I'm also somewhat aware of these historic pendulums that happen. Like,
That's true.
I was listening to, I think it was like a New York Times podcast or something, and they had a historian on, and she was talking about sort of these moments in history where there was a lot of hope and a lot of joy around, you know, the movement for Black empowerment and Black sort of autonomy in this country. You know, there was it 1860s is when slavery was abolished,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
1860s.
Around there.
So like that was like one huge moment, and there was a lot of celebration, like Juneteenth. There was a lot of joy and celebration around that. But then things kind of like slid backwards, like then you know forms like it slid into sort of Jim Crow, and or no, was there was like the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s, was it?
Yeah.
Where it was again this like celebration of like Black culture, but then after that, like into the 30s, 40s, there was like Jim Crow era, and then we moved into like mass incarceration era, and then there was the 60s, and there was the civil rights movement, and like again there was this surge and this momentum, and then it kind of like slipped again, you know what I mean? And now we're back. I sort of feel like we're back, and that's what the historian was saying, is like we're back at a moment of mass consciousness around the issue. You know, some things have changed. There's the Civil Rights Act, and there's more and more awareness about the issues, but she was also expressing some concern that we could very easily slip back the way that history has done again and again. But you raise a good point, Tarik, that like the internet changes everything. Seriously, changes absolutely everything. So who's to know?
That's right.